Welcome to today's webinar, Changing Sales Tax Legislation and the Impact on E-Commerce. My name is Jessica Kaiser. I'm from Avalara, and we're proud to be sponsors on this presentation today with our friends at Nomad eCommerce. We're going to be kicking off here just in a second with Jason Warren, who is a manager and an Avalara founding team member with the company. But before we get started, just a couple of items I wanted to cover with you. First off, I wanted to let you know that we will take all questions at the end of the presentation today, but if anything comes up along the way, you can go ahead and submit your question in the Q&A button at the bottom of the console, and we'll make sure to get those addressed again at the end of the session. We will have a couple of polls throughout the presentation today just to help make sure it's interactive and that we're hitting on the things that are important to you. It helps to get a sense of kind of where you are in your needs and journey with sales tax. And finally, we will make the recording and the slides available to you after the session today. You'll receive an email tomorrow with links to access both. All right, I think that's everything for now. We'll go ahead and kick it over to Jason.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. And thank you to the team over at Nomad for your partnership and for sponsoring today's webinar, where we're going to be focusing on changing sales tax legislation and specifically around the impacts that it has on companies that are selling through an e-commerce sales channel. We have a lot to cover today, and really by way of introduction, if you're not familiar with Avalara, I would like to just spend a moment, if you don't mind, on just a little bit about who we are and why I think maybe there are some reasons that Nomad selected a partnership with us. We have been in business now for over 15 years and with more than, as you can see, 20,000 active customers. But the service itself really is a full-featured service, and it's going to cover you not only on the Nomad side, but also too on the Macola side. So if you're looking at this from both an e-commerce compliance perspective, but also a back office perspective as well when it comes to your invoicing, and really having something in place that's going to scale with your business, with the changes that occur in your business, whether that be through organic growth, whether that be through growth by acquisition. You want to have certain technologies in place, and that would include automation around sales tax compliance. Avalara does everything from giving you the tools that you need to accurately calculate and determine sales tax, not only at a state level, but also a local level. In addition, it takes that data and it aggregates the data for you into reporting, both invoice detail reporting, as well as jurisdictional reporting too. And so we're going to cover those things, talk about some of the aspects of really having this automation, even for your exempt sales as well, and leveraging technology that is native to the cloud as software as a service, has always been there since 2004, and provides you with a true multi-tenant platform, which means it's going to scale with your business regardless of the number of transactions that you might have, the way that you're doing business, whether you're transacting by processing invoices, in addition to allowing really your customers to self-serve. And so we're going to talk about that. And we're going to do that in the context of a couple of key things. One being economic nexus, which is something maybe you've heard labeled as the Wayfair decision by the Supreme Court in 2018, so a little more than a year ago. We're also going to talk about it, too, in the context really of some of those things that you may already be dealing with today, maybe via spreadsheets, maybe via tables within each of your systems through the tech stack. Whatever those might be, we're going to talk about some key areas there that, and hopefully you'll be able to come away with really a good sense for what you should be thinking about, what things maybe you should prioritize if you aren't today when it comes to tax compliance. And we'll use some time at the end to answer questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the rates aspect of this and determination, and then we're going to pause because we have some questions that we would like to pose to all of you, just to get a good sense of where you're at in and around the topic of sales tax compliance. So when you think about sales tax, If you're like most people that are controllers within their organizations, CFOs, VPs of tax, accounting managers, when they talk about sales tax, it's really around getting the rate right. And if you think about it kind of on a micro level, or at let's call it a state and local level, at a single state, it can be achievable for you to get the right rates into your system. But above and beyond getting the rates into the system, it's really then beholden on you or folks in your organization to then accurately assign those rates to each of your customers, as well as all of their ship-to addresses. But when you peel that back and you look really under the surface, if we take an iceberg as kind of the example here, and we look below the surface, it really is so much more that goes into being fully compliant with the states, whether you're talking about being fully compliant in one state, a handful of states, or every state that has state and local sales tax. It's all about determining nexus, so we're going to talk about that and how Wayfair decision last year had a major impact on what constitutes your company having physical presence or a nexus in each of the states. And then the products that you're selling, and not only the products, but also the services that are value add to each of those products, and the freight charges if you're selling physical goods, and what you need to consider when it comes to the definition of that product, its taxability, not only across each of the states, but also at the local level within many of those states. Next is jurisdiction assignment. I talked about it a little bit earlier, right? If you can get the rate into your system correctly into a set of tables, how are you able to then know to assign based on what criteria? Are you using a zip code? Are you using something like a geocode? What is that determining factor? What is that data point that's being used? And are you 100% sure that every single time the appropriate rate is being assigned, if you're doing it in a manual fashion or maybe using some other type of technology to make that decision? The fourth piece is exempt sales. We see this a lot, especially in manufacturing as well as within distribution, right? Not selling direct to the end user, if you will, and having to collect documents to accurately and appropriately document those sales where you've exempted from collecting any sort of sales tax. You can fully automate that process and really create a rock-solid, audit-proof approach if you automate using the Avalara platform around your exempt sale. And I'll talk about it a little bit, but we're seeing a growing number of companies that are now using the Avalara technology in conjunction with a platform like Nomad eCommerce, where they are able to open up self-serve buying, self-serve purchasing through their e-commerce site, even though they're selling B2B and their customers, all of them or many of them or some of them are exempt from having to pay sales tax. You're able to use Avalara to capture that exempt document during the shopping cart transaction. So it really allows you to scale the growth across not only your B2C transactions, but also B2B. State and local tax prep, right? Getting the returns done properly. I alluded to this earlier, but Avalara can determine the sales tax. It will aggregate the data, so the invoice transactions themselves, all of them, whether there's tax that's been determined or not, and then also, too, with regards to the aggregation of that data, that information being populated on the returns, which is then going to lead you to number 6, which is audit readiness. I'm on a webinar. Yeah. Are you going to talk to her? Okay. So that's a little bit around audit readiness and really the whole aspect of full tax compliance. I'm going to pause there, and in a moment, I'm going to switch gears to Nexus and some things that we've been seeing. But before I do that, Jessica, I'd like to turn the microphone back over to you. Are you ready with that first polling question? Looks like you are.
Yep, got it up now. So the first question is, how are you currently managing your sales and use taxes? Are you doing it somewhat manually, utilizing tax tables? Do you already have a tax automation solution in place, or are you unsure how your business is managing sales and use taxes today? If everyone could take a second and jump in and pick the option which best describes
There's
your
no
business.
right or wrong answer here. We just want to really understand where you all are coming from. It's very helpful.
For sure. And we'll go ahead and close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, well, we've got some experts on our hands, Jason. We've got 2/3 of the people saying they're using tax automation today and 1/3 using tax tables.
Okay, great. That's really good to know. Thanks everybody for participating in that. So, given the answers that you provided just in that first polling question alone, and we have one a little bit later. We have one more, I believe. Isn't that correct, Jessica? We'll put it on the screen in a little bit. Okay, great. So all of you may be familiar with this, and maybe most of you, maybe not all of you, so I'll touch on this anyways. But physical presence has always really been kind of that driver around what we refer to as nexus. What's your company's requirement, your obligation, based on the legislation to go ahead and not only obtain a business license, in many cases probably, but also register for the collection of state and local taxes where appropriate. Last year, there was a major decision that was made by the Supreme Court, and really nobody, including Avalara, really had any sense for which way the Supreme Court was going to decide. But in June 21st of 2018, in South Dakota versus Wayfair, the Supreme Court made the decision that states are allowed, as of that decision, to set thresholds, which would then really mandate, through legislation, a company's requirement to register in their state. And those thresholds are based on one of two factors, and that is the number of invoices into that state in a 12-month period, or the total sales into that state in a 12-month period. Many times when I share that information, there are a lot of questions that come up. I'm going to show you some resources that are available to you through the Avalara website. I would encourage you to take a look at those and maybe even bookmark them in your browser of choice, because Avalara, as the states come on board with this type of legislation, Avalara is keeping that resource on Avalara.com up to date for you. So it's a great reference point. What we're finding, because a lot of times when I talk about the sales, a majority of those states are actually basing it on the total gross sales. So it's the combination of any of your retail or taxable sales plus your exempt and non-taxable sales that really factor into that threshold that the states have established. You can see here, this is just kind of the nitty-gritty on a little bit around and some reference points for you on that decision made by the Supreme Court. This next slide is a visual for you. This is a capture of the site on Avalara.com that I was referring to. You can see this is dated as of July, but we keep this up to date in almost real time. I'll take you out there here for a live look in just a second. But you can see it's very helpful. A couple of different ways you can look at it. One, visually on the map itself, you can see those states that are highlighted in this blue across the board. That blue represents states with economic nexus legislation that's been enacted. You can see, if I just highlight as of this date, you can see Missouri, for example, Ohio, Florida are not included in that. But we'll take a live look in right now, and we will take a look at the Avalara website. So Avalara.com, I hope you find this helpful. Underneath the resources drop-down, you'll find that there's a link to South Dakota versus Wayfair. And in that, we give you a lot of context that you can draw from, but we also give you some reference points as well. And I think that you can see here, there's some things that we talk about that go beyond Wayfair, right? And then latest information on Wayfair, and we really try to bubble up for you the latest headlines that are specific to those states that are coming on with what we call the Wayfair legislation. Let's see here. We also provide to you this great resource where if you go to the sales tax laws by state, you can look at this from our perspective of not only economic nexus, but you may be impacted by the legislation specific to, for example, affiliate nexus or click-through nexus, or more traditionally, physical presence that would require you to then register, or marketplace facilitator. So this is a very comprehensive site. You'll see if I highlight and click on economic nexus, here are the states as of today that have enacted the legislation. If we look a little bit further, we can see, for example, the different states and at a glance which types of legislation those states have in place today. So I hope that's helpful to you. When you have a chance, I encourage you to take a look at that further. If you drill down into the economic nexus heading itself, you'll see if I go to California, for example, this right here acts as a live table of contents, state by state. If I go to California, and again, this is a free resource to you, so I hope you'll take advantage of this. You can see when legislation was enacted and when it's actually the date of enforcement, which transactions are included when you have to consider those thresholds, and ultimately some of the other really important details around economic nexus on a state-by-state basis. You don't have to even go to the table of contents. You can simply scroll. And so what we do here is we really try to put it into more easier to consume, easier to understand detail for you. I think one thing you're going to find, and this is a common question, I have the opportunity to do these presentations all of the time, and a very common question that I get from the audience members is, Jason, thank you for this context. This is very helpful. I can read up on this and really understand how this is going to impact the company that I work for. But what should I do? What's my next step? And I think that you'll find that whether you use the Avalara technology that's available to you via the Nomad integration, or if you go a different path, it's just very important that you look for technology that is actually on top of and in line with the ever-changing legislation and requirements. And you'll find that Avalara, with the 15 years that we've had to really establish ourselves and provide this technology that is in lockstep with the legislation, if you do something as simple as go ahead and subscribe to the Avalara service, connect it to Nomad, and you start to run the transactions through the Avalara service, and let's say you only have one state enabled when you first subscribe, Avalara will monitor, Avalara's platform, the technology will monitor all of the invoices that flow through in all the other states, and it will provide you via heat map a visual. And that heat map is designed around all of that legislation, so you won't have to be an expert. You won't have to memorize state by state what the particular thresholds are. Avalara, via that heat map, the capability built right in, you're going to see that visually represented for you. And at that point, you'll be able to go through either your trusted tax resource, if you have a third party you work through today on all things tax, including state and local. Maybe they can go ahead and do the registration process for you. Or you can actually, as a part of the subscription to Avalara, Avalara is an SST certified provider. And we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But before we do that, I think, Jessica, I think it's time for our next slide, or our next poll.
Sure thing. All right, I've got it up there now. So this question is, how much urgency do you feel to implement an automated sales and use tax compliance solution? Option 1, I feel the pain, I need it now. Option 2, it's on my to-do list, but I have other priorities that are more pressing. Option 3, it isn't on my radar screen. Or option 4, I'm already a tax automation pro. If everyone could jump in and help us out with the poll and let us know kind of where you are and where your business sees its priorities. Greatly appreciate it. We'll see some responses coming in, and we will go ahead and close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, well, we are actually split evenly this time between I feel the pain, I need it now. It's on one with 1/3. 1/3 saying it's on their to-do list, but they have other priorities that are more pressing. And then the final third, it's not on their radar screen. Back to you, Jason.
All right, thank you, Jessica. And thanks again, everybody, for taking time to participate in that poll that Jessica provided. So getting back to the topic at hand, just one other visual for you on the heat map. I did show it. I actually logged into the Avalara service. There you saw it, momentarily while I was still out in my browser. But again, this is a heat map. This is a part of the Avalara platform itself. It's included as a part of the subscription. And what it will do is it will keep track in those states that are not enabled with regards to Nexus. And it will give you visual based on the economic thresholds. And it will go to yellow if you're at 80%. And once you achieve 100%, it will go to orange. And at that point, you can make the decision, if you haven't already, to proceed with registration. There's a couple of things that we would ask, and I would specifically ask you to consider, and that is a program called SST, which is Streamlined Sales Tax. It's a program that's been around now since 1999. Avalara became a certified service provider through SST and by the SST states in the year 2006. And so what that means for you is that if you register through SST and you designate Avalara as your certified service provider, in those states where you're voluntarily registering, the service itself is going to be free, meaning that the transactions that are run through your Avalara subscription are not going to count towards your plan. The returns themselves will be filed at no additional cost in those states that are SST states. And you'll see that here on the map that I'm providing. They're highlighted in green. There are 24 states. Of those 24 states, you can see that there is a majority of them that also have economic nexus legislation. So what does this mean for you? I already talked a little bit around transactions and returns. But what I didn't mention is the fact that if you register for SST, it's a single registration, and it covers you in all 24 states. So it really drives down your cost, overall cost, not only for the subscription to the Avalara service, but also with regards to having to manage and somehow keep track of individual registrations that you would have to do on a state-by-state basis. So that's something I'd ask that you consider. That's available to you from Avalara. Not all sales tax technology providers are certified service providers. And so that's one thing that you should just at least keep in mind if it seems like it might make sense for your business. Avalara can do the registrations for you if you decide not to go with SST, if you want to stay kind of the traditional route. In addition to doing the registrations, Avalara can also do the business license process for you as well, the application process. And regardless of the number of states that you would need Avalara to go through and do that on your behalf, we only need about 2 weeks to complete that from start to finish for you. So you have options. If you decide you don't want to use or go the route of SST, you absolutely can stay kind of down the traditional path. But just know that if you don't have an advisor that does that work for you or somebody on staff that does that work, as far as the registration, know that Avalara certainly as a partner with Nomad can do that if you'd like to have us do that for you. So the platform itself is native to the cloud. It's always been a cloud-based application, software as a service. It's true multi-tenant, which means it can handle as many transactions as you need processed. It can be, it can handle thousands of transactions per second. No matter how many you actually capture in the invoicing process for reporting and audit purposes, really the the bandwidth is limitless. And it really gives you the ability to scale. We have customers that have been with us for the full 15 years. And once they subscribed, it's really for them, it feels like set it and forget it. They had configuration that they did when they first subscribed. For the first 2 or 3 months, they certainly monitored it at a more granular level than I'm sure they do today. But as a part of this service, what we do is we break it into 3 distinct parts. The first being Avatax, which is focused on tax determination. And that would be the piece that would connect directly between Nomad and the Avalara service. The team at Nomad has built an integration that is certified by Avalara's team here to be a fully functioning integration piece that you would enable, configure, and you'd be off and running. What it gives you access to is not only Avatax, but it also gives you access to the returns component if you choose to subscribe to that. And with returns, we automatically bundle in the SST piece unless you tell us to decouple that and get rid of it. And so what you're going to get is you're going to get the SST component for the 24 states, and any other states that you're in, either currently or know you need to register, will be covered under our traditional tax return filing services. And then the third piece, cert capture, and that's where you can automate the capturing of exemption documents, whether those are for resale, direct pay permit, the list goes on, right? Manufacturer's exemption, government level exemptions, things like that, agricultural exemptions, all of those are covered and automated for you through that cert capture component. In addition, there's an add-on that you can take advantage of if you choose, which would be appropriate for Nomad, and that is it's an e-commerce add-on where you can incorporate the exemption document collection right within your shopping cart, and now your B2B customers, without having to call you, can place orders if their exemption is expired or if they've never done business with you and they need to provide that exemption. They can do that all through the shopping cart experience if you have cert capture in place. So those are the three components there that are covered under the Avalara service. Jessica, time check. How are we doing so far? I see that we're, I guess, at the 30-minute mark.
That's
we're
correct.
still
Yep,
good?
we're good. Yep.
All right. Okay, I would like to, if I could, just share with you just a set of statistics here real quickly, and then I'd like to go back into the Avalara service, and would like to then use the rest of that time to answer any questions that you all might have, and we can go from there. So this, I just wanted to share with you a little bit more context on bandwidth. And so these are just proof points for you on Avalara's ability to scale with your business. Whether you're a business that's seeing rapid growth organically, or if you're seeing a combination of that, organic growth, in addition to any acquisitions that you might be making, know that with the Avalara technology, we've designed the system so that it scales with your business. These are some pretty decent sized numbers, I think, and that's why I'm sharing, but you can see that I highlight, for example, Cyber Monday, because that is our biggest day, hands down, of the year. And you can see the kind of growth that we've seen year over year with regards to those adopting this technology and incorporating it, not only in conjunction with their e-commerce, but also in conjunction with back office. So it really, truly allows you to scale and fully automate and achieve full sales tax compliance. All right, I'm going to go back out to Avalara. This is a live look into Avalara. I'm going to leave you with this. I'm seeing that we're at 31 past the top of the hour. So just for a couple of minutes, I want to share with you really what the interface looks like. We've designed this interface with a lot of customer feedback over the years. And what we've done is we've focused on providing you with an easy-to-use interface that's going to be used in a couple of key kind of milestone points. One, when you first subscribe, this is going to be the place that you would want to go in and configure. We find that most companies, what they'll do is they'll designate one primary admin of the Avalara service, and they'll have two backups. And it's important that you have that redundancy for many reasons within your organization. But once you subscribe, You can then go through the settings panel, and you're not going to go through necessarily everything that's here available to you, but at a minimum, you are going to designate within your Avalara subscription where your company today is registered and required to collect state and local taxes. And so what looks a lot like a spreadsheet type interface, because we've got columns, we've got rows, you have the ability to easily add any state, any country where you are currently registered to calculate, report, and remit. So you can see that that's all covered here. It's probably intuitive. You're probably noticing this already, but I have as much as I can turned on for demonstration purposes. It's not necessarily going to reflect what you might have to do. If this was actually configured through the SST CSP program, any of those states that are SST states would be designated with SST next to them, and those would be locked in place as a part of that SST program. So you wouldn't have to do any of that configuration. It would be locked in place, and transactions and returns would be included as a part of the service. It would not go against your overall plan. So that's where you configure what we call where you collect. There's also a section within the Avalara platform where you're able to configure the items that you sell. And the way that you do this is what you're going to do, and I'm going to oversimplify this for you, but it really is this straightforward, and that is the Avalara tax codes. These are also referred to as goods and services codes. And these are Avalara unique codes designed by and managed and maintained by Avalara's analysts in-house. And behind all of these codes, and these are categories of products and services, behind each of these codes are all of the necessary rules at a state and local level. So once you associate your products and services, and you can do this through Nomad, the interface that you have in Nomad eCommerce, or, and what we typically recommend, you can actually do the mapping inside of your Avalara subscription. And the reason that's something to at least consider is because if you have multiple pieces of technology, say back office ERP, Nomad eCommerce, whatever pieces of technology that you have in your organization that are going to be doing any sort of invoicing or sales order processing, it's going to be important for you to be able to centralize the administration of that taxability. Finally, I just want to share with you a little bit on the reports and the returns. So we have two pieces that you get. So one is the reports, and those reports are included with your AvaTax subscription if that's the only thing you choose to go with and not the return subscription. And in this, you get pre-configured set of reports, and you'll see that we categorize those reports, and then we also then have a list of those reports by name. There are invoice history reports. We call those transaction history reports, and you can run them at any level of detail that you like, by jurisdiction, by address, by line item detail. Above and beyond that, you can also run reports at a jurisdiction detail level. And so this allows you to really align kind of your audit process to the tax return filing that's being done. And so with that and the tax return filing, you can easily see at a detailed level what Avalara is filing for you month in and month out. And so you can see there's a whole set of reports that you get. And then finally, if you subscribe to the return service, you can, once you're subscribed, simply go into the returns scheduler and configure those returns. And the way that you do that is you go into the Find and Select Form screen, pick the state that you want to configure, and you go and you find the form that's appropriate for the state and local sales tax that Avalara will be filing on your behalf. And that includes not only the completion of and the processing of the returns themselves, but also then the remittance of the funds directly to the states. After all of that work is done, as far as the filing, everything is archived for you under the Filed Returns and Confirmation section, and that is all maintained for you on an infinite basis, ongoing basis. As long as you're subscribed to the Avalara service, you'll have access to that. So that's a high level, kind of a primer for you on Avalara and how easy it is to use. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and turn it back over to Jessica and see if we have any questions.
All right, thanks, Jason. So just a reminder to everybody, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the console, and you can go ahead and put any questions that have come up during the presentation in there. So first off, this is the first that I've really heard of much of this. What is the best place to start?
I mean, I would encourage you, and I know it's going to sound biased, but I would encourage you to go to the Avalara resources page. It's really we work hard to boil all of this down for you, so at least you can gain a comfort level and really start to understand what potential impact you might have. There's a couple of things you can even do either through a tax firm or directly through Avalara. We do offer Nexus Study. And if you want to really get a good sense for, in a traditional sort of way, physical presence, you can go that route. But I will say that when you look at economic nexus legislation and the way that this is really kind of rolled out, it really takes the guesswork out of it for you, and it really does simplify kind of what those thresholds are. If you, at a minimum, are registered in your own state today for the collection of any sort of sales and use tax that might come up where you're headquartered, I would encourage you to consider that there still is value for you there to subscribe to the Avalara service, because then Avalara, the technology itself, will track your transactions against economic nexus legislation, and you'll have a good sense for kind of where those numbers are. Through the Nomad team and ultimately with Mo's assistant, and Mo is on the call with me today. I've hogged all the talk time, but Mo can even work together with you to kind of look at those numbers. We do that from time to time just to kind of see what the thresholds look like, and we can give you a sense for, where you likely should be registered. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you. Next one. You talked about free services through the Streamlined Sales Tax Program. Is that something that many companies are able to take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. I can tell you that statistics have shown that, and I'm not going to get down into actually like specific numbers necessarily, but percentage-wise, we've found that ever since the Wayfair decision has occurred, that of the customers that are subscribing on a monthly basis that come to us and subscribe for the very first time, close to 30% of those that subscribe for the Avalara service are also taking advantage of the SST program, and they qualify for it. I think that's telling in that they're taking advantage of that program when we talk about that kind of that 30%. And so, just to give you some hard numbers, I guess we find that somewhere between 700 and 900 companies subscribe to the Avalara service on a monthly basis. So you can kind of glean from that percentage-wise how many of those businesses are able to take advantage of it. I've been here for 15 years, and in my opinion, I think more of those businesses qualify it, but they might have reasons of their own where they decide to kind of keep it traditional and subscribe to the Avalara service along with returns, rather than taking advantage of the SST program. That's something we can answer more questions for if you'd like, and get more into that if you need us to.
Thank you. Do you have resources that are available to help me justify to my management why we should transition from tax tables to an automated service?
Yeah, we can give you talking points, we can give you some statistics, really, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, I can give you some anecdotal, evidence if that's helpful to you as far as, tax tables really do address one particular component of tax determination. But as we saw in one of my earliest slides, there are actually 6 categories that need to be considered, right? And so determination, although it's very important to get that accurate, it's really very difficult when you look at it from a jurisdictional perspective. For example, if you look at avataxrates.com, it's not something I talked about today, but it's something I think is still available, but I can at least give you a visual if it's not available to public anymore. This is an overlay of the Avalara technology, and I can show you the whole U.S. It's kind of hard to see, but if you notice, as I drill in to any of the major metropolitan areas, even, a city like Minneapolis, you can see jurisdictionally that if you really truly were to get it right with tax tables, it just isn't humanly possible in a lot of these major metropolitan areas because it just gets so convoluted. I mean, if I look, for example, in these cities here surrounding New Brighton and some others, you can see that there's these pockets where you would think it's one set of rates, but tucked in here, we're just surrounding an area called Columbia Heights, the rate is actually different, right? And it's all based on jurisdictional assignment. The Avalara technology itself is used by many of the states today. They've abandoned their own ways of doing it through spreadsheets and other manual ways to try to keep track of their own sales tax boundaries, and they utilize the Avalara technology now to update, maintain, to track, and to be more accurate even with their own jurisdictional details. So we're happy to come alongside you and answer any questions and really give you the tools that you need to be able to go back to management to justify why automating tax is really is going to prove to be a huge cost savings to the business and really protect the business's interests when it comes to being audit ready and doing something that will support the business as it scales in its own growth. So hope that helps.
Thank you. Perfect. That is all of the questions that we've gotten in so far. So we'll go ahead and say thank you again to our friends at Nomad, as well as all of the people who joined us today. We will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the presentation slides and the presentation recording. And that will also have Mo's contact information should you want to reach out and discuss how we might be able to help further. So thank you, Jason, for presenting today, and thanks again to Nomad and our attendees. Have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.